What are the best and worst matchups for your wide receivers in fantasy football for week 3 of the 2022 NFL season? How about tight end and defense? It's time to break it down start sit wise with all the matchups here on Locked On Fantasy Football.
Our Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for SportingNews.com. We've got our Week 3 picks against the spread, my start sit-em column, The Decider. We also have our sleeper and bust picks here for Week 3. So check all that out at SportingNews.com. Here on Locked On Fantasy Football, we're going to break down my wide receiver, tight end, and defense start-sit advice here, the matchups you want to look at through these games here, and look at my rankings as well. So we'll go down and see the notable guys that stand out in the rankings, and then we'll also say maybe some guys you want to avoid there at wide receiver and tight end, and we'll look at some defensive recommendations and maybe some defensive traps here that you want to avoid in week number 3. We'll get into all of that in a moment. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. We are free and available to you on all platforms. This is also a special Prize Picks crossover Thursday presented by our friends at Prize Picks. Check out all our Locked On NFL team shows there to get the breakdowns of these games. Prize Picks is so much fun and it's easy to play. No competing with other players, just you versus the projections available. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times their money on your entry. You can literally take fewer than 60 seconds to enter. It's that easy. We love Prize Picks. We know you will too. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code Locked On. And it's been fun to play, and we'll give you some tips on Prize Picks here on Friday's show as we close the week with our injury and DFS report. Today, it's the wide receiver, tight end, and defense recommendations for your lineups here in week 3. Let's get into it here. We'll go through the guys that are pretty obvious here. Cooper Kupp and the Rams playing the Cardinals. Justin Jefferson at home against the Lions. Really good matchups there. Same thing with Stefon Diggs against the Titans. And we have Devontae Adams as well in a really good spot against the Titans. So we have Diggs, I would say, playing the Dolphins. That secondary could be without Xavier Howard. So we like our big 4, Kupp, Jefferson, Diggs, and Adams quite a bit this week. You look at Jamar Chase, I think he'll have a rebound game against the Jets. So really big 5 there. A.J. Brown will also rebound against the Commanders here. So those are our top 6. Kupp, Jefferson, Diggs, Adams, Chase, and Brown. Tyreek Hill, tough matchup against the Bills, but he's red hot, connecting really well with Tua Tagovailoa. They should have passing volume there. Deebo Samuel in a pretty good matchup with the Broncos, where you might have Patrick Surtain, too, missed the game with a shoulder injury, so like him at number 8. Amon-Ra St. Brown is too hot here to cool down here against the Vikings. You also have Mike Williams at home against the Chargers. They're for the Chargers against the Jaguars, so some good stuff there with Mike Williams. That matchup, Cortland Sutton, looks like he might dominate some targets there with the Jerry Jeudy battling a shoulder and rib injury for the Broncos against the 49ers. Jalen Waddle, Michael Pittman, I like him to have a bounce-back game if he can come back. It looks like he has a good chance against the Chiefs. Michael Thomas, too involved in the offense right now to sit. I think he is a strong red zone threat here for Jameis Winston. So you look at Michael Thomas there as a really weekly play at this point. T. Higgins played through the concussion, came back last week. He's up there. Keenan Allen also in a really good spot against the Jaguars. Rashad Bateman, you can't sit him after the 2 big games he's had against the Jets and the Dolphins. Patriots secondary not scary. Gabriel Davis can go back and have his nice game playing against the Dolphins this week. Christian Kirk, a little tougher, but you're going to go with him in the matchup against the Chargers secondary. It's tough, but he's red hot, just like St. Brown, where he's not on your bench. At least he's a wide receiver 3 value in your lineups. That's where you drafted these guys. They've overachieved and exceeded those expectations here. Terry McLaurin, it's not the greatest matchup there against Darius Slay and the Eagles, but he's got to be in your lineup every week there with the volume he gets in the Carson Wentz passing game. DJ Moore scored last week. He typically does well against the Saints. You have Brandon Cooks, better matchup for him this week at the Bears, and CeeDee Lamb and Deontay Johnson for Thursday night to round out the top 24 there in my rankings. Now let's go to guys that I definitely want to look at here that you would put on the start side. I mean, Drake London looked excellent last week. He got going against the Rams of all teams there with Jalen Ramsey, Troy Hill, and their coverage guys. But Rams have been giving against wide receivers. So the Seahawks here allowed the big play touchdown to Jerry Jeudy. Sutton had a pretty good game in week one. Last week, Debo and Brandon Ayuk combined for some good numbers there against the Seahawks. So really like this Drake London emergence here as the real number one target. I feel like Mariota trusts him more at this point than Kyle Pitts. It's been harder to scheme Kyle Pitts open. Maybe the attention on Pitts has been tough here, but London playing off that has seen favorable coverage. So like that against the Seahawks this week. Speaking of Brandon Ayuk, I liked him a lot to have a breakout game in the Surtain. We circled that injury. That's going to be pretty key here if he can't go for the Broncos. He's a very good young corner. So look at that. I mean, it would open up things in that secondary for Jimmy Garoppolo here. So like it. I think we're waiting for an Ayuk breakout game. I think it potentially comes here. Good matchup for Allen Robinson against Byron Murphy Jr. and Marco Wilson of the Cardinals this week. So like that, I think he'll score again. This Commanders offense has been outstanding. So Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson, you want a piece of them. You figure Carson Wentz is going to have to throw a ton there, probably 40 to 50 times on the other side of his replacement in Philadelphia, Jalen Hurts. Revenge game for Wentz. He's going to fire up all these receivers, and we're going to see more of the production we've seen in the first 2 weeks in this matchup. And the Eagles' defense is tricky, but again, we saw it give up points quite a bit to Detroit in week one. I think last week against the Vikings, a little bit overachieving there with the home emotional primetime bump. It's not we typically get, and Kirk Cousins, I think, contributed that as well. All right, we're looking at Amari Cooper tonight on Thursday Night Football. It's a good spot for him. You're going to keep playing him. He's now reestablished himself as the number one for Jacoby Brissett. I don't think that's going to go away. And so far, outside of Minkah Fitzpatrick covering the slot, they struggle a little bit with Cameron Sutton in coverage. There's points available against the Steelers secondary there. So Hunter Renfrow, we're going to watch him. It looks like he could miss this game. He did practice early in the week with concussion against the Titans, but I do like him if he's out there. Titans are pretty thin there. They gave up some good slot receptions there to the Bills and Giants in the previous 2 weeks. All right, let's go to Devonta Smith. Got back on the board last week. I think they can work him in the slot a little bit. He's not a guy who typically plays a lot in the slot, but I think they could scheme him open as well as A.J. Brown, where the Commanders have struggled big time. We know the first 2 weeks have been absolutely terrible there against Christian Kirk and Amon-Ra St. Brown. All right, Garrett Wilson and the Jets here. I like him. He's emerging closely as the number one receiver. Again, Elijah Moore's out there actively running routes here. You also have the play of Corey Davis being decent, but Wilson, the talent manifested itself really nicely against the Browns. So I think it happens again against the Bengals secondary. We'll watch Treylon Burks, a little bit of injury there, but I think they're going to start to establish him more. So the rookies, we talked about them on Pickup Tuesday. I think they're going to establish themselves a little bit more this week in their lineups. Again, the first-round rookies have come through a little bit already. We've seen Wilson have his big game. Dotson has been red hot here out of the gate. Chris Olave is warming up. Burks is getting there. So, and these guys are drafted for their talent, and the talent starting to come through. And again, the Bengals, Raiders, good matchups respectively for Wilson and Burks this week. So these guys can really help you win your matchups there at wide receiver 3. So rookies that we like here. Now, these two players, I don't expect a lot, but I think a good chance to get a touchdown from both. Russell Gage for the Buccaneers, everyone's out. You have Mike Evans out. Chris Godwin's probably going to miss another game. Julio Jones is out probably another week. You should have Brashad Perriman battling through an injury. Scotty Miller's battling through an injury. Somebody's going to get the ball from Tom Brady in this one. So the Packers, I know they have one Jair Alexander, but I think they might play a little more zone defense in this game. I know that Brady likes to throw a little bit deeper, and we saw what happened in week one with that. So Gage, I think, will be the number one there for the Bucs, and you can't ignore that. Same thing with Alan Lazard on the other side. Is Bucs secondary hurting a little bit with Carlton Davis on the outside, but he should play. I still like Alan Lazard. He's pretty much a red zone guy that you're looking at on your teams here this week. Some deeper players that I like here, and these are guys that we'll talk about more. These are contrarian plays that you would put in DraftKings tournaments. You look at Tyler Lockett here. He really came on last week. Geno Smith, we thought Geno was going to be better for Tyler Lockett. That happened last week against that 49ers secondary. It's the Falcons secondary this week, which is great for Lockett because that means that DK Metcalf will probably see A.J. Terrell. Lockett can work the slot where they're not as strong, the Falcons. So do like Lockett quite a bit this week there after his 100-yard game against the 49ers. And again, could be a lot of scoring in this game against the two bad defenses on the field. Darnell Mooney, if there's any week for him to get back going after two horrible weeks, it would be against the Texans secondary. I know they've got some guys back there, Derek Stingley Jr., the rookie, but I think the Bears passing game will see more legitimate numbers from them this week. We've been waiting for that from Justin Fields to get not only Darnell Mooney, but Cole Kmet involved. I think it happens a little bit here with the Texans. So don't totally give up on Darnell Mooney. The matchups get a lot better. I mean, it doesn't get much harder than the 49ers and that pass rush in a rainstorm, and then the Packers and Jair Alexander on the road. It doesn't get much tougher than that for any team on the matchups here. Chris Olave, the Panthers have a pretty tough secondary when you look at the guys they have. J.C. Horn, young player that I really like. You got Dante Jackson as well. There, Jackson a little bit hurting, but Chris Olave, they'll scheme him open. So I do like that because I think he's a tournament play right now because he's a big play receiver here for the Saints. All right, we will get into our wide receiver sits here, guys that we don't like as much here in our lineups, and that could be in for a rough week that may cost your matchup. We'll get into those guys in our second segment here, but I do have to tell you about a new sponsor here on Locked On Fantasy Football. It is Nugenix here, and getting older changes your body. I'm getting a bit of a dad bod. I'm feeling a little less like my old self. Don't have always the same time to work out. You might feel this as well, but you want the energy that your body once had. You discovered Nugenix, you felt revived. I mean, that's what you will feel when you go into Eugenics, working out like you used to. Remember when winning felt easy? That's because when you were younger, you were off and at the peak of your testosterone production, what some have called the winner's hormone or the man hormone. Wouldn't it be nice to get that winner's edge back again and that old swagger in your step? Want more energy to counter the negative physical effects of aging? Nugenix Total T Testosterone Booster with Testofin will help you turn back the clock, re-energize your workouts, get you better results at the gym, or help you look and feel like the man you really want to be. Nugenix Total T contains man-boosting key ingredients such as Testofin. It has been validated in 5 clinical studies shown to boost free testosterone levels in men. While every product professes quality, many other products use generic ingredients that are often far less than clinical grade. With Nugenix Total T, you get the same clinical potency levels used in the trials, and Nugenix formulation is backed by 10 years of science and research. Nugenix Total T is the #1 selling testosterone booster at GNC. Nugenix Total T can help re-energize your life and help you get back the powerful, confident, good-looking warrior you used to be. Now get a complimentary bottle of Nugenix Total T when you text NFL to 231-231. Text now and get a bottle of Nugenix Thermo, their most powerful fat incinerator ever, with key ingredients to help you get back into shape fast. Absolutely free. Text NFL to 231-231. Text NFL to 231-231. Message and data rates may apply. Terms apply. Available at nugenix.com/terms. All right, it is time to continue this show and break down our wide receiver, tight end, and defense recommendations. We got to the wide receiver rankings and the plays that you're looking at this week. Let's dive more into the matchups and maybe guys you want to avoid in your fantasy football lineups as much as possible. If you can, you got to have better alternatives, however. We'll keep that in mind. Marquise Hollywood Brown against the Rams. I mean, it's been rough when you look at the numbers for wide receivers and the Rams. I mean, Jalen Ramsey's got to get on Marquise Brown. There's nothing else here. He's not going to be a Greg Dortch. He's not going to be an A.J. Green. I think they got to scheme him to take out the best receiver. Marquise Brown is a speed-based receiver. We're not seeing a lot downfield here from the Cardinals and Kyler Murray. So shut it down with Marquise Brown this week. DK Metcalf. We mentioned how much we like Tyler Lockett. We liked Lockett last week. We didn't like Metcalf as much, and that came to fruition against the 49ers. It's going to happen again. He's getting frustrated. Look, he doesn't have Russell Wilson. He's going to be mad. Geno Smith can't get him the ball downfield. He's a speed receiver. He's a big body receiver. Lockett, our little guy, is getting it done. So Terrell and Metcalf shut him down here now. Juju Smith-Schuster, they're against the Colts. You really can't trust anyone. They still have a pretty good slot corner in Kenny Moore. I know Christian Kirk got going last week, but Moore was a little bit hurting. He's off the injury report this week. So keep that in mind there with Moore versus Smith-Schuster was really tough against Bryce Callahan against the Chargers last week in the slot. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be a slot machine, and not in the way of inside receivers, but between Sky Moore and Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Justin Watson and other receivers they have, it's going to be a different guy every week. And I think it could be a Marquez Valdes-Scantling week. We've seen Mecole Hardman get involved as well, but and I don't think they want to expose Hardman too much here. So Valdes-Scantling, the Colts can give up some big plays here. They try to keep things in front of them, but if anyone you're going with, it's MBS here, and it's just hard, the way they're spreading it around. Much like what we have with the Packers, at least we know that Al Lazard is the target in the red zone there, where it's all over the place for the Chiefs in that regard. Now, Jerry Jeudy, you can't play him here. I mean, I look at Tyler Lockett, he did pretty well, and Jeudy does line up in the slot, but the shoulder rib injury, I think he may not be an option for you anyway. I think they downplayed it a little bit in Denver. So it could be you'll see more of the rookie Montrell Washington in there. KJ Hamler is already banged up a bit here, or you can see more Albert Okwuegbunam there at tight end. So something to look at there. So if you're looking and counting on Jeudy, it's a tough matchup, and he's hurting this week. Jarvis Landry, we didn't like the things there that we saw last week. It kind of was a backseat. We thought this might happen with Chris Olave and Michael Thomas really being the primary receiver. So Landry had the big game in week 1 against the Falcons here. I think that's a product, again, of the Falcons struggling more in the slot and being a little bit better outside. The Panthers are pretty good inside as well. So going to stay away from Jarvis Landry in this matchup against the Panthers. Definitely pivoting to Thomas Olave being the key targets here for most of the season with James Winston. All right, we're going to Jacoby Myers here. And yeah, we can't go with him. Nelson Aguilar actually had the big game last week. This Ravens secondary, I think, will rebound. Here they allow a lot of things to happen in the middle of the field, let Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle lead the comeback. That's not going to happen again this week. The Patriots also don't have the same type of passing game with Mac Jones. Adam Thielen, we're going to try one more time with Adam Thielen. He's overdue to have a key target here. They need to get him involved. All of a sudden, we're seeing Johnny Munt and Irv Smith. They're KJ Osborne, these wide receivers not getting a lot of run here for the Vikings. So I don't love Thielen really all season long, but this is a chance to get him a touchdown here. So we have to just say that's the only way you can play Adam Thielen if you're looking for the score, and that's pretty much not going to happen here this week. Elijah Moore, we look at him again. The usage is not happening there behind Garrett Wilson and Corey Davis, so not going there. So Thielen, again, touchdown dependent if you're going to roll with him. Elijah Moore, I don't think you're getting enough volume there with that Jets receiver. I mean, they've talked him up the secondary receiver, but you're going to have a shiny new toy with Garrett Wilson. You might deflect it, and I think we've seen that with some other teams as well develop, including Jahan Dotson versus Terry McLaurin there with the Commanders. Tyler Boyd, you can't recommend him. I mean, just not getting enough looks here. I know they're throwing to him in the red zone and the slot, but again, they're also incorporating Hayden Hurst at tight end a little bit more. You're playing off Chase and Higgins, so can't go Tyler Boyd. Definitely going to avoid Chase Claypool and George Pickens. Looks like the windy conditions there. I don't think you can play either of these guys until Kenny Pickett is in the lineup. I just don't think you can trust Mitchell Trubisky to get anyone the ball that isn't named Deontay Johnson and Pat Freiermuth. Robbie Anderson, I don't like him at all against the Saints here on the outside. He could see Marshawn Lattimore in coverage, so they're not going to allow him to get free for a big play this week. So those are the guys that I would recommend sitting there among your wide receivers for fantasy football in week 3. Again, these guys, if they're not your best options, go somewhere else for sure and avoid those guys in your lineup there in week number 3. We'll get into our tight ends and defenses, start and sit them there in our final segment here on Locked On Fantasy Football. Before we do that, it's an exciting time of the year with baseball finishing up almost near the playoffs here. NFL is providing a lot of great action. It's only week 3, so plenty of time to go here in the regular season to get in on the action. And the best place to do that is at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for football betting information of the season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles, analysis on every game you can find. And always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sport wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf, and of course, the NFL. Head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more and find out about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, it is time to close the show looking at tight end, our rankings and stardom cinema advice. Travis Kelce, lock him in. Mark Andrews, good to go. They're playing the Colts and the Patriots, respectively, this week. Darren Waller, tougher matchup against the Titans, but he's the best number 3 right now that you can look at in this position here, and they might use him a little bit more at wide receiver inside as a big slot should Hunter Renfrow miss the game, so keep that in mind. That would help him, of course, against the Titans, and we saw decent numbers from Dawson Knox last week. Kyle Pitts comes in at 4. I think this is the game here. The Seahawks, you look at the first 2 games, really struggle against the Broncos tight ends. It didn't matter that George Kittle and Tyler Kroft got hurt. Ross Dwelly had a long touchdown. So Kyle Pitts has a chance to really get going finally here. So be patient. 2 weeks doesn't tell you the whole story of the season. Pitts can be key this week. George Kittle looks like he's going to return. Speaking of Kittle, and the Broncos, again, we saw in week 1, they struggled with Will Dissly and Colby Parkinson of the Seahawks. So last week, we didn't see much from the Texans tight ends, but Kittle is Kittle, and he's got his boy Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback. And Dallas Goedert also in your lineup every week, part of that Eagles offense, really rolling with Jalen Hurts on top of A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. Pat Freiermuth, lock him in on Thursday night. I mean, this is the favorite target of Mitchell Trubisky, no doubt about it there, that he's looking for him in all the key situations. Big yardage day in week 1, big touchdown day in week 2. Zach Ertz, the Rams are pretty tough here against the tight end. They have some pretty good coverage there, but Ertz has been acting like a receiver here. First 2 games pretty good, kind of like Freiermuth. 1 volume game, 1 touchdown game so far, and that's as good as it gets in his position. I also like on the other side of things, Tyler Higbee. It looks like Van Jefferson's going to miss another game. The Cardinals, tough tight ends to start the season here with Travis Kelce and Darren Waller. I know Higbee is not that guy, but I think he'll get some good targets here. They're going to scheme him open pretty well. Dawson Knox, the Dolphins can give up some numbers to tight end. We saw that with Mark Andrews last week here. So setting up nicely here for Dawson Knox there, especially if Gabe Davis is limited or has to miss the game. Gerald Everett, they might need him a little bit more if Keenan Allen's hurting, but he's been locked into this offense pretty well. Justin Herbert looks like he's going to play, so no issues there. Logan Thomas, much like with Dallas Goedert, we want to attach him also to the receivers in his team here with playing off Dotson and Mclaurin and Curtis Samuel. So he'll be involved, and he always has a good shot to score a touchdown. Very good red zone body there. Hayden Hurst getting a little bit more run. The Jets do struggle with the tight end, so we saw a good combined game from Harrison Bryant and David Njoku last week. So that's going to help the Jets in here in this matchup. And we had a decent game, not an explosive game for Mark Andrews in week 1. Tyler Conklin, again, getting a little bit more run. The Bengals had trouble with Pat Freiermuth in week 1 last week. The Cowboys tried to get Dalton Schultz going before he got down. So Conklin has been very much involved behind those receivers in New York. Now, here are the guys that I would definitely sit this week. J Hawkinson, yeah, you can't trust him. Now he's got a hip injury. A lot of wide receiver love from Jared Goff. And the Vikings, we'll see Harrison Smith is dealing with a concussion. That might open things up a little bit but you got to sit Hawkinson based on his production so far this season and wait and see approach with him. Robert Tonyan, you need a touchdown. It's not happening for him early in the season. Evan Ingram has to share with Dan Arnold, and don't forget about other guys such as Jamal Agnew and Travis Etienne Jr. out of the backfield. So there's a lot of intermediate short targets to fight for in Jacksonville. That's why Christian Kirk has been the clear number 1 there, because everyone else is kind of piecemeal and committee approach for the shorter targets for Trevor Lawrence. Taysom Hill, no, you can't go there. You thought that he might get a little bit more juice here without Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram and Dwayne Washington hurting. It didn't happen there last week. So week 1's a fluke. He can always get a big player touchdown, but it's too risky it's a boom or bust play. Mike Gesicki, I think he'll go back to being quiet. You have Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds is very good coverage unit for the Bills against tight ends. So no Mike Gesicki this week. Cole Kmet, nope, we can't play him. We got to see there. I'm more willing to play Mooney and give him a shot in this game versus Kmet, because Kmet doesn't have the same history of production that Mooney has, and Mooney's a clear number one target here, so keep that in mind. Now, if you're looking for a Brown tonight, I can't play David Njoku because of Harrison Bryant. You can't play Ertz Jr. because of Johnny Munt. You can't play Albert Okwuegbunam too confidently here because they're involving the guy Andrew Beck, so that's a little bit worrisome there. The Patriots, Hunter Henry, Jonas Smith, not really helping each other at all produce. The Seahawks, we've seen Will Dissly and Noah Fant and Colby Parkinson. Nope, not going to be there. The Buccaneers, Cameron Brate. Tom Brady's simply not going to him without Rob Gronkowski. So Cameron Brate and Cade Otton, it's not happening there with the Buccaneers tight ends at all. Now let's go to our defenses for the week. I think the Dallas Cowboys are going to rebound. I have them number one. I think you look at the Giants, Daniel Jones, the turnovers. It's a perfect team for the Cowboys to attack with big plays with Michael Parsons and Trayvon Diggs. I do like the Browns. Myles Garrett, I think, is going to eat against the Steelers. I also like Denzel Ward and their safeties to make big plays versus Mitchell Trubisky. I do like the Bills still weak. I think every week play for the Bills, and they'll make something happen and get some mistakes from Tua Tagovailoa. Ravens are going to force something out of Mac Jones this week. They're number 4. Chargers at home, I like them a lot against the Jaguars this week. You have the Bengals at the Jets. A little bit buyer beware after what happened in Dallas last week. It seemed like they were a smash team, didn't come through, but I think the Bengals will be desperate and play better defense this week. The 49ers, Russell Wilson struggling. I think they'll get after him a little bit this week here with their pass rush, Nick Bosa leading the way. And the Rams, it's been nothing scary so far from Kyler Murray. All right, the Saints and Panthers, you can look at them in the same game. Low-scoring affair expected between Jameis Winston and Baker Mayfield. We also know there could be some interceptions there. You could also play the other side of the Browns defense with the Steelers against Jacoby Brissett. There's no TJ Watt. They'll have to find a way to get sacks there. I think they'll adjust a little bit with Mike Tomlin. They'll give him some rushing yards, but maybe some turnovers from Jacoby Brissett to make it a low-scoring game. The Buccaneers and Packers, that side of the game, you can look at it. That's crazy to think that you can play the defenses that are playing Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, but that's how we're looking at it, given how loaded these defenses are at every level to make plays against limited offenses. Bears, not a bad streamer this week. Davis Mills gave up some good points to the Broncos last week on the road, not the same good road quarterback. And Eagles, they might get some turnovers there. Carson Wentz with Darius Slay and company. So that's what you look at for the defense you want to look at. I'm going to shy away from the Broncos. The defense against the 49ers is just not going to happen this week. The 49ers tend to protect the ball. The Broncos run defense pretty weak. Chiefs, I'm going to park as well. I think the Colts are going to play pretty well here with Jonathan Taylor. Not going to go there. Giants seem like a start that you want to put in against the Cowboys, but I think the Cowboys are going to run effectively on them and put Cooper Rush in comfortable situations and win the game. Vikings, I'm not going there this week. I know it's Jared Goff on the other side, but the Lions can put up a lot of points, as we've seen in the first 2 games. Patriots, defense hasn't looked good. They were okay against Trubisky, but we know they struggle against Tua Tagovailoa, the Dolphins in week 1, so not playing them against Lamar Jackson. And the Colts defense, pretty weak here. I'm not thinking about them as a play either in week number 3. So there you have it. There's a breakdown of your start-sit advice for wide receiver, tight end, and defense. Yep, it's a packed Thursday. We got it all in for you with our rankings as well, and guys that I really like their matchups this week and guys that I would recommend to avoid. So that's how we're going to do it with our Matchup Wednesday and Matchup Thursday show. We've remixed it to be all about the position. So quarterbacks, running backs, they're going to be on Wednesday, wide receivers, tight ends, and defense on Thursday. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. That means Friday we'll be talking a little bit of DFS. We'll look at the FanDuel, the cash games, and the targets there. Maybe a few DraftKings recommendations there for tournaments, as well as price picks of the week. There's a lot of good stuff there, as well as your injury report, who's likely to play, who's unlikely to play here ahead of week 3. Now, make your second listen to Peacock and Williamson NFL show. Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson give you the expert NFL analysis in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this is Vinnie Iyer. Have a great Thursday. Good luck if you've got some Steelers and Browns going, and we'll catch you there. Close the week with injuries and DFS on Lineup Friday.